Hello, everybody. On behalf of IMEA, the State Department of Education, and District 3, I would like to welcome you to today's virtual PD opportunity. Rob Sullens is back for part 2 of Percussionology, effective percussion pedagogy for all grade levels. Today's presentation will be recorded and can be viewed later on the IMEA YouTube channel, where you will be able to access all of these virtual PD opportunities. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation, so please put your questions or comments in the chat and I will be monitoring them. I would like to thank Megan Olswanger and the leadership from District 3, IMEA, and the State Department of Ed for providing these opportunities. Please remember that we are trying to continue these presentations throughout the fall and are still looking for volunteers to present on their expertise. I will put my email in the chat and please reach out if you have something to share. Tune in next week on Thursday, October 8th, as Elizabeth McFadden, an orchestra teacher in Idaho Falls, will lead us through managing a blended classroom for those of us with little technology background. She will guide us through Google Classroom, Google Slides, Boom Learning, and Screencast-O-Matic to help organize and navigate the orchestra classroom. At this time, I would like to turn the time over to Rob Sullens. Thank you again for being here, and we're really excited for part 2.
Well, thank you very much and welcome everybody. Again, thank you, Rebecca and Megan, for this opportunity. So like they said, this is round 2. So if you can check out, there's a YouTube video of the first part. So I'm gonna kind of jump in where I left off and then I might talk about some of the technical things, but I wanted to try to get through some of the exercises that I had listed in the handouts. I think Rebecca could probably post that stuff. I have a Dropbox folder with a bunch of information that I'm going through that could be helpful to everybody. So I'm gonna start with some snare drum techniques. One thing I mentioned previously was just in my mind, I think it's better to train the students to start with snare drum than necessarily mallets. And the main reasoning for that is I know how complicated mallets can be. We have, reading the note names on the staff. Some of you are probably doing classrooms that have percussion and something else in it. And then it's also the ability to do the note names on the instrument. So it's aligned a lot with other instruments. However, I think fundamentally training the students how to hold the stick is more appropriate than training them how to play mallets first. And I'll just go over that kind of real quick. So part of it is, if we're going over the grip, in a percussion grip, we're taking our index finger and we're placing the stick in that first knuckle, and then we have our thumbprint on the side of the stick and we're wrapping our fingers around. So we have a front fulcrum, so the stick has to have the ability to maneuver within this fulcrum. If we teach that from a mallet standpoint, and my grip also differs from mallets, is usually we sometimes it's taught that the grip is in the front here, like between the thumb and index finger, and we wrap the fingers around. I actually talk about gripping with the back fingers first and then adding the thumb and the index finger. So when you're playing a mallet instrument, it is more of a mechanical, like self-generating rebound stroke. So there's a lot of technical things that can occur when students are learning about the mallet instrument that can be an immediate hindrance. And this is a big reason why students, when they play, end up with their back fingers off the stick, is they spend potentially the beginning of the year holding the mallet and gripping with a really tight fulcrum, thumb and index finger, and their back fingers just kind of exist behind the stick or mallet. And then when it comes time to move on to the stick, they have this ingrained that they have to pinch in the front. So what I like to do is try to ingrain in them the skills in order to rebound the stick and keeping the fingers on the stick. And then when it comes time to move over to the mallet instruments, it can be, it's a little bit more appropriate, and their fundamental wrist motion and approach to the instrument is a little bit more solidified. The other thing is on snare drum, where we're just worrying about one target, for the keyboard, we have a lot other targets that we have to be consumed with. So that's just one quick thing. If you're following along in the handout that I have, there's part on the Google Doc that is entitled Effective Percussion Tips. If you jump down to where it says General Percussion Exercises, I'm going to kind of jump in there. So as far as my understanding of percussion and music, I think that all music skills are based on coordination. I know a lot of percussion that's assumed, but I think that being able to teach all your band students that there's a certain level of coordination that is needed in order to perform your instrument well is inherent in all instruments. So in percussion, instead of just thinking, like, I think when we think coordination, we're thinking like drum set, and we're thinking 4 different limbs. And I look at it as, in percussion, coordination is between your right hand and your left hand. So we have to be really well coordinated in order to be able to isolate those limbs independently, and then also add our foot tap to that as well. So starting with a really solid foot tap and making sure that that is second nature before we get to our sticks and all that is important. So usually in my classes, the first thing we're doing is learning, obviously, like the staff, we're learning rests, we're learning note names, but we're also counting a ton. So, and while we're counting, we're always using a foot tap and ingraining that first primary skill to become almost independent of like everything else that they're doing. And then when we finally get to playing, we are layering another coordination on top of that. So now we're adding our foot tap, which is playing, you know, quarter notes on the downbeats, and then our foots are up on the upbeats, on the and counts, and then our hands are doing something independent of that. So right off the beginning for percussionists, we have three-way coordination or three-way independence, where a rhythm's being played in our right foot, and then another rhythm's played in our right hand, and another rhythm's played in our left hand. So that being said, coordination is a learned skill, and I'm a perfect example of it. When I was in school, like I didn't start learning percussion until I was in 10th grade. I thought that you could either do it or you couldn't. And I was never really taught a method that you can learn to be more coordinated. And it's just slow and steady and being able to think about all the limbs. And I'm gonna try to give you some ways to tackle that with some of these exercises. So going on from there, I'm gonna jump into where it says, we already did 8s with dynamics. So 8s with dynamics, just as a quick review, 8 on a hand is really important to get students to understand how to bounce the stick. So we're trying to create this rebounded stroke, a full stroke, to start students off and understanding how the stick bounces. I watch a number of students play and the stick stops down, and then they generate the rebound by lifting the stick back up, and that's not a true rebound. I use a basketball analogy. So if I'm holding a basketball, in order to get the ball to bounce, all I literally have to do is turn my hand over. So if I'm getting to the point of where the stick is up, I can literally just kind of drop the stick, and the stick should rebound on its own. So we're trying to get students to learn how to do that. And we do that by starting with 8 on a hand. So it's really important to make sure that that is really inherent in what they're doing before we move on to something else. So the first thing I have with our layout, which I talked about on the last webinar, which was the 8s with dynamics, how to find your heights by just using the sticks alone and using other sticks. You should check that out. So with that being said, I'm gonna jump on to the next kind of exercise, which after talking to some people in the area, I've realized that the way school's structured with everything that we're dealing with is we have limited amount of time. And I started thinking about what fundamentally was needed to be learned by your students. And I think this exercise, 8s, double stops, and 16ths, is really, really important. And if it's like one of the only things that they learned how to do, it's pivotal to their success for the rest of their percussion career. So I'm going to play through the exercise. I have a handout that you can check out and find the exercise, but this is basically the exercise in a nutshell. So it's going to be 8 with my right hand, 8 with my left, and 8 double stops together, and then a bar of 16th notes. Okay, so that is a tremendous amount for, let's say, a beginner student. But what's important there with beginners is the appropriate tempo. I like trying to teach this around 50 beats per minute. So when they're playing the 16th notes, they're able to rebound the stick. So what usually happens, so I'm gonna show you all the pitfalls that usually happens when students learn about this. So most students, so we've already taught 8 on a hand, so we're gonna assume that their right hand and left hand rebounding is solid. So the next part of the exercise, we're doing double stops. So what double stop shows students is, number 1, that the sticks are going up and down and hitting the pad at the exact same time. So what I'm trying to get students to do is I'm looking at the beads. So if the beads are up here, I'm looking right in between, and I'm trying to watch students' eyes when they play to make sure that they're looking up here and not down at the pad. And at this point, this isn't taught like with sheet music. It's very much rote teaching, because I want them to think about how the stick rebounds. So as I set my sticks up, so I'm looking here, and a full wrist turn I define as fortissimo. So this is 12 inches. I like them to play this at forte, or 9 inches, because when they get to 16th notes, students inherently want to try to play everything higher when things get faster. So it's counterintuitive, and you always have to tell your students, play lower, play lower, play lower. And with some of your students, you might literally need to tell them to play at a mezzo forte, or around 6 inches, so that they're able to rebound the stick and they're not squeezing and they're not trying to just beat the pad to death, which is very common. So when you get to the double stops, the volume going from your 8 on a hand to the double stops should be the same, and it's something you should be focusing on with your students. So when I go from here, and I'll use a metronome so we can hear some of this. So I'm showing you the appropriate tempo. So this is really slow, so we're doing it here for beginners. As you can see, the stick bounces up. And then when I add the double stops, I don't want anything to be any higher or louder. So I want everything to maintain the same volume. Most students will play the double stops louder and harder, and they'll start downstroking. The other reason why we're doing this is that coordination idea is, even when we do hands together, the motion is the same, and we're not changing the motion when we add limbs together. So we want to make sure that that is nice and relaxed, and we're doing it with a foot tap. One thing to talk about foot tap is, when I'm doing this, I do a very exaggerated foot tap. So it is a sharp down and a sharp up. So it's literally going down, up. So it's going down, down, up, excuse me, down, up. Let me get my tempos right. Down, up, yeah, so it's that. Down, up, down, up. So if you can see my foot, when I play that second note, my foot pops up for the and count. And then when it hits the ground, I'm making sure that that's lining up. On top of the coordination, it's really important. What I tell my students, I can't preach this enough, and I do it with middle school students and I do it with high school students, is I tell them that their foot has to be with the metronome and their hand has to be with their foot. Like, that's the order of operation always. What students most likely will do is they will try to make their foot go with their hands. And that means that they're not developing an internal pulse, and they're just trying to make their foot do what their hand does. So if they're not playing good rhythms, everything's just out of whack. So we build that coordination and that really strong foot tap, and we start here, and I'll literally tell students, I'll go down, up, down, up, down, up, 1 and 2 and ready and play, and down, up, 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 and then we have together the same thing, down, up, down, down, up. Okay? So I'll make sure that all of that works flawlessly before we go on to the next step, which is the 16th notes. So the next step before they can do this is they have to be able to count 16 notes. So sometimes what I do with the students, if we're playing this tempo, I'll have them, while they're playing double stops, say 16th notes while they're here. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. So we're always thinking ahead the rhythm that's next. So at that point, we're assuming that they're comfortable counting 16th notes with the metronome at this tempo and being able to go from 8th notes to 16th notes. So this is the tricky part. So when you go from the double stop, so we're going to say this is 4 and. Both sticks should rebound up before you play your 16th notes. It is very common that even if all the double stops are glorious, you have the perfect child that is doing everything perfect, they will get to the and of 4 and they will downstroke that note and then lift the sticks up and then play 16th notes. And then they'll start downstroking all the 16ths. So the trick is to make sure that students, when they get to 3 and 4 and, pause there, make sure both sticks are up, and then maybe play just the first 2 16th notes. 3 and 4 and 1 E. And if they're counting 16th notes, 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E. And we want to make sure that that rebounds those 2 notes. And this is where the coordination starts to change, and students will start to approach it differently because now we're playing quote unquote faster. When reality is we're learning how to develop coordination, that this left hand has to pause 1 16th note or 16th rest longer before it comes in. That is really critical when we're teaching that. And that is if I would say the key point of the whole thing is that moment. 4 and 1 E. And I would break it down until students can do that. So it's going full stroke, full stroke, full, full. Or just go full, 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 full. If I'm not clear, a full stroke is when the stick starts in the up position, strikes the pad, rebounds back to the same up position without any interruptions in between. If it stops at any point, it's called a downstroke. And most students usually stop. And a downstroke occurs because the student is stopping their wrist down or they're squeezing the stick. So I can have the stick rebound up if I take my fingers off and I hit the stick. You can see it bounce up, but because my wrist isn't coming up, it's impeding the stick from coming to a full rebound. So it's going to be really important that your wrist strikes the pad, comes up, my fingers are relaxed, and it comes all the way back up. Something else that when you're playing this exercise is to resist the urge to squeeze or play louder. So usually what happens, like I said before, is the exercise will gradually get louder for most students when they first play it. So it'll go from your actual forte, and this will be louder, and then they'll play the 16ths as high as they can. And most of them don't have the strength to do it, so you have to keep telling them to play lower. And like I said, if you have to have the students play the whole thing at mezzo forte to make it happen, do that. Pad stuff, when it gets faster, lower, 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 lower. The other thing when I'm thinking about the group setting, because it's more notes, students will start listening to each other instead of listening to the metronome. So it's really important that you do this individually so that they can master focusing on the metronome by themselves, because inherently what they're going to want to do is play together, and they'll want to play together with whatever instrument sounds the same. So you'll have to take it either one person at a time and then slowly put 2 people together at a time until they can get it together and they feel strong and confident independently. Otherwise they'll just try, it'll be chaos. But that's okay. So it takes time to build that up. So that's 8 double stops and 16th notes is one of the cornerstones in what I teach students. One of the other things I didn't talk about is you're looking for a consistent motion. So if I'm bouncing the basketball, I'm just trying to get that wrist turn to happen at the same rate of speed every single time. One other thing that's happening in this 8 double stops and 16th note is my right hand pretty much plays 8 notes the entire time after my left hand plays. So my right hand here, this sets this up. My left hand. Now when I go to my double stops, my right hand's still moving at 8 notes, and my right hand's going to continue at 8 notes. So this might be one of the things where you can get students to practice one thing on their leg. You're trying to keep that consistent hand motion. One thing that is a big understanding of mine is most educators make the mistake of telling students that they're not playing the rhythms correctly. And that's true, but the reason in percussion why most things are not happening rhythmically accurate is because of inconsistent hand motions. So if they're not playing in time, it's not because they don't understand the rhythm, it's because they physically are not generating a consistent hand motion in order to be able to play rhythms accurately. So the technique is usually having an extreme effect on the rhythmic quality. Even if your kids can count everything, when it comes time to put it on the drum, it's that consistent hand motion in everything. That is fundamentally what we're trying to do in teaching percussionists, which is consistent hand motions. So really keep that in mind. So that's that one. Moving on, the next one I have is 8th note, 1-note timing, and 16th 1-note timing. Give me 1 second while I bring up the Dropbox folder. So this exercise is now a continuation based upon what we just did with our 8th double stops and 16th notes, but now I'm kind of breaking it up so that we can apply this to alternating strokes throughout. 1 second. Okay. So if you're looking at the PDF that's entitled IMEA D3 Clinic Snare, and you go down to, sorry, my computer's lagging. If you go down to the 8th note, 1-note timing, I'll play through this. This can be done in both 8th notes and 16th notes, and I've done the variations you can see below. So I'm going to show you the 8th note one. So again, what we're trying to do is now we're saying, okay, we've got 8 on our hand under control, and now we're pretty solid at alternating. Now what we're going to try to do is start with our alternating strokes, and now we're trying to take rhythms away and have a consistent hand motion. So we have that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1. Now, most students cannot or have trouble with playing upbeats, not because they don't understand the rhythm, it's because it's a coordination issue. So the foot tap has to be going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. The foot allows the hand to fill in the space. So for example, so if I have my first measure of 8 notes, I'm going down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. When I get to the second measure, I want to make sure that students understand that when my foot comes up, that's filling in that space. Down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. I'm still playing a full stroke, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And that's really what I'm looking for the students to be accomplishing. So I'm looking at their foot and I'm making sure that they're playing full strokes as they play these quarter note rhythms. It's not just enough that they can just go 1, 2, 3, 4. They have to be thinking down, up foot motion that's subdividing their time. And then they have to coordinate that, like I said before, so that the foot is lining up with the metronome and the hand is going with the foot. So if the foot is subdividing the 8 notes, then the hand just has to make sure it fills in, it lines up with the foot on the down foot tap. The same thing happens with the up foot tap or the up stroke. So we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and up, 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 up. And I will change how I'll say stuff like this. I'll isolate just that last measure and make students say foot, hand, foot, hand, foot, hand, foot, hand. So they have to literally go down foot tap, then the hand. So they literally have to just go foot, hand, foot, foot, hand, foot, foot, hand, foot, hand, foot, hand, foot, hand. And I'll make them look at their shoe and go foot, go down, hand, foot, hand. And then when the foot comes up, that's when they have to be hitting the pad. Foot, foot, hand, foot, hand, foot, hand, foot, hand. And we will do this until they can't mess it up. Because again, it's not that you're trying to get them to understand how to play 8 notes. It's that you're trying to get them to understand the coordination of their foot on the downbeat and their hand on the upbeat. If you can get students to do this, like I marked it here at 60 beats per minute, and you just loop those two measures over and over again, once they understand how to play upbeats, like they'll understand it forever because they've ingrained the coordination correctly between their foot and their hand, and they understand what it's supposed to sound like independently of the metronome. So those are some simple tricks on like how you can do that. This is an excellent exercise for any grade level. I'm helping out at Eagle High School right now. We play a variation of this exercise. We play actually that exact version of that exercise at the high school right now. And we do it pretty much every rehearsal. So we start at 120 beats per minute, and we'll go all the way up to like 180 beats per minute. For beginners, it's just a slower version of that. One thing that I tell my beginner students is there's nothing that I would teach them in 6th grade that I don't teach high school students. And what I mean by, and then I tell them the only thing that is different is in high school, everything's just faster. So all of the mechanics that they learn in middle school or in 6th grade will apply the exact same way when they get into high school. So moving on, you have the 16th note version of this. This one, I will teach as slow as 40 beats per minute. And this is where, again, I wish I was given this when I was younger, because it would have made a lot more sense, because I just figured I couldn't do it. So if you look at this, so I'll play through the first two measures. So you have 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Now, I will start this with beginners at 40 beats per minute. So it's literally going 1 E and a 2 E and a. Now, if again, I'm gonna jump to the second measure, and again, we have that 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a with our foot tap. So if I'm doing just the 16th notes, I'm looking, if they understand 1 E and a 2 E and a, forte dynamic, I'm having them look at their foot and making sure they're going down, up, really sharp, down, up, in between those 16ths. So when they play the right hand, it's going down, up, like we did before on 8 on a hand, okay, or alternating 8 notes. And then the left hand's fitting in between, down, up, okay? So the next part, when we get to the E's and U's, which most people are like, oh, that's so difficult. Usually it's difficult because it's not slow enough for the student to be able to process it. Now, again, this is based on ingraining 8 on a hand, 8 double stops and 16th notes, and some version of our 8-note downbeat upbeats. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go really slow, and it might not even be 40, is I'm going to have students go 1 E, 1 E and up. So what my foot is doing is it's going down on 1. I strike the pad on E, it's a full stroke. Then my foot comes up on and in between the stroke, and then I play up. So if you do that correctly, you've now filled in all 4 16th notes. So you have 1 E and up. So you have down, let's see if I can say that. So down, E, up. And I'll have students literally go down, hand, up, hand, down, hand, up, hand, down, hand, up, hand, when they're 1 E. And again, so now we've shifted the foot tap to be half the speed of what it was before, when we were going down, up, down. Now we're doing it so that the foot happens, the down foot tap happens every 4 notes. So it just happens to be 16 notes. I will do this until, like this, I will literally spend a week or a couple weeks on. But I found that once you've ingrained this coordination skill, they now know where downbeats are. You can now teach any student any grouping of 16th notes, because they understand how the foot falls and the subdivisions of either E's and U's and downbeats and ands. So ultimately, this exercise, if we're playing it, should be at 40 beats per minute. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 a, 4 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E, repeat, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. And again, while I'm doing this, you'll notice everything is a full stroke. The stick never stops down. Second bar line. Where it says right hand motion, the first 2 beats, the right hand stays consistent, and then the left hand stays consistent. And what I mean by this is, again, we're looking for consistent hand motions. That's what we're trying to design through, even though there's some rhythmic, it's more rhythmically advanced, you're still concentrating on stroke types and coordination, not just rhythms, coordination and stroke types. So if you look at measure 66, it says right hand motion. What that means is the right hand goes 1 and 2 and. 1 and 2 and. Then the left hand has a consistent motion. 1 E and a, 2 E and a. So the left hand. So it goes back and forth between a right hand consistent motion and a left hand consistent motion. So that's really what you're trying to teach in that exercise besides just the rhythms. And usually it's slow enough that students can grasp those concepts. So the next thing that I have going on too is a 3-note grouping version of that. So same idea. And if you go down to the next version, I did it in 8 notes because those are the 3 most common 3-note 16th note groupings or 3-note 8th note groupings. And if you look on the next page, it's the same thing, just twice as fast. So where it says that constant right hand motion, for example, if I'm playing like the 16th note version, I'm going 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. My right hand is literally just going 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. That's what you're trying to develop. Next rhythm, same thing, 1 and a, 2 and a, 3 and a, 4 and a, and we're inserting that one left hand. The trick with these groupings is when you take rhythms out, is that you'll have the left hand and sometimes right hand rhythms either too soft or too loud. So you want to make sure that all 3 notes are balanced. And again, they can do this if they have it memorized by looking up. If in doubt, always, when going faster, play lower. If students are really struggling, their stick's out of control, make them play only at 6 inches. If they can't play, I have students I tell play at 6 inches and they're still playing at forte, I'll make them play 3 inches. I'll make them play as low as they can, or as low as they have to in order to play the rhythms accurately with a consistent hand motion. Okay, next one, which is probably the one everybody wants to know, is like, how do I get my kids to play double strokes and buzzes and all that kind of fun stuff? And I'm here to do my best at trying to explain how. Okay, so this is the roll build-up. This is on the Snare Clinic page. So the first thing you need to teach students is the infinity bounce. What I'm about to show you, I'm not doing anything different with my hand than I just did for all the other exercises. So when I'm playing 8 on a hand, and I'm assuming I have a nice, everybody can see that I'm jiggling the stick, I should be able to pull the stick out. That's how little pressure I should have on the stick, like when I'm holding the stick. So when you see me playing all these rhythms, you should be able to walk up to me and the stick should come out of my hand. That's how relaxed it is. If that's in place, what we're trying to shoot for is an infinity bounce. Now, if you'll notice, my fingers are really close to the palm of my hand. So you can look at it that way, okay? I'm not squeezing, okay? So if you're looking up here, okay, everything, the stick should jiggle in my hand. So when I go to play, what I'm not doing is taking my fingers off the stick and trying to just let the stick fall to the pad. You are trying to let it fall, but the most important thing is you're keeping your fingers in the same position. Like another big thing about percussion is the fingers aren't doing this while you play. They might be doing this while you play. And that's a big difference. And you probably think I'm not moving my fingers, but the fingers are only moving like maybe a quarter to a half an inch when you play stuff. Okay, so when I turn my hand up, if I'm in this like ready position, I turn them up, my fingers are still close to the palm of my hand. So if I go from here and I rotate up, you can still see that my fingers are in the same place. I'm not going from here and then opening my fingers up, which is what a lot of people think is going on, okay? So with that in mind, I'm keeping my hands relaxed. I'm rotating up to my fortissimo height, and I'm literally just going to let the stick fall to the pad and bounce as many times as it wants. And it's gonna come to rest. Try that again. Okay, if you notice, my fingers are still in the same spot, okay? Like, there's a little bit of a gap here in my hand, but try not to teach your students to take their fingers off the stick, because it's almost impossible to get them to put them back on the stick. So again, fall to the pad. Soft hands, try to get the left one. Come to rest, okay? Again, the analogy with students is, in order to make this happen, if I took a basketball and dropped it on the ground, the ball would automatically do that. What students are gonna want to do is try to use their wrist and manufacture the rebound like this. And they think it's happening right here. And that's not the case. What's happening is, because my fulcrum is in place and my hand is relaxed, the stick is doing it its own. And if you notice, when my wrist falls, the wrist stops moving after it falls. Okay? So I would go around the room and make sure all the students are comfortable with doing an infinity bounce, and that they can do, I start with one hand. Usually once they get their right hand right, magically their left hand will do the correct thing most of the time. Okay, so now we have an undetermined number of bounces that the students are doing. Now I want them to pick the stick up after 4 bounces. So this is where they have to count, and usually I count for them. And then pick it up. You don't have to change any pressure with your hand. You don't have to do it. You literally just have to pick the wrist up, and it'll stop. And I'll make them say up. Up, that was 3. Up. And again, none of this has to be in time. So I can go 1, 2, ready, and up. And I'll count them off every time. Then you reduce it to 3. Up, 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 up. And I know it sounds like I'm oversimplifying this. It's literally that easy to get a student to play a double or a bounce. They usually overthink it and try to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Then 2, up. And if you notice, my hand stays down for a second, and then it comes up. So the trick is to try to get that up to happen as soon as you can after the second bounce, without creating any kind of tension or pressure in the hand. I'm just literally pulling my wrist up. If students have a hard time do that, go back to the infinity bounce. And because what they'll start trying to do is, when you start going to these 3 notes, they'll start trying to go 1, 2, 3, and they'll go wrist, wrist, wrist. And you want it to be 1 wrist turn, 3 bounces, or 2 bounces, or 4 bounces, whatever you want it to be, okay? So after you've gotten all of that under control, and that will take a while to do, we're gonna try to actually put it in time. Usually most students, what they do is, there's too much pressure in the fulcrum, and the fulcrum is what is basically determining how open your rhythms are or how close they are. So if you have a student that's like squeezing between the thumb and the index finger and they turn, it's usually going like really close. I'll have students literally take their thumb and take it off, put it back on, and then try to do it again. So if the wider the rhythm is, there's a couple things that are probably happening. Mainly it's the fulcrum. Some of them might try to throw the stick at the pad too fast. Okay, that'll cause it to be really loud and the rhythm close. I'm literally letting the stick fall. It is the most counterintuitive thing ever. So again, basketball, the goal is to drop the basketball and it's to go bounce, bounce, and you just pick the ball up. Bounce, bounce, pick the ball up. That's it, okay? So now we're gonna try to put it in time. So in the next part of this exercise, I have the teacher version so you understand what's going on. And I have the student version. So in measure 100, you see a 16th and a 16th rest. So what you're going to try to do, like, let's say we're going to do, let's do 3 notes. Here's something else that's kind of counterintuitive. Buzz rolls are only 3 notes. When I do that fast enough, that's how a good buzz roll should sound. Most students squeeze too hard, and you end up with that really tight, like I can hear the rhythm that their arms are moving, the check pattern underneath rhythm. That's because there's way too much pressure and they're pushing into the pad too hard. So you're trying to just get them to do those 3 nice, relaxed, open rhythms. So if I'm using my teacher version, I am going to go 1, 2, 3 up. So it's kind of, you're kind of going E. So 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and So we do a check first. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and What I make the students say is up, 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 up. And this is with a foot tap and all that kind of stuff. So again, consistent hand motion to start. Now. And they're probably going to get different variations. They're going to get like 2, they're going to get 4, they're going to get 3. And the goal is that for them to try to figure out the hand pressure and how relaxed that they can do that when they're doing it. So if I'm doing this, again, this is 40 beats per minute. So I'm going down, up. I'm trying to lift on that E count. I just tell them to just lift. So I'm not trying to overcomplicate what's going on. So if I play this is the roll build up single-handed, it should sound like this. For the beginners, you might not necessarily have to do the both version, that's with the B underneath. But if you can get them to do the right and left hand version, you're going to be in a good place. And again, you can do it doubles. You're trying to get it to be as open as possible. Again, sticks just falling, lifting, up. So we can obviously understand the rhythm. So it's just going one, like 2 30-second notes, up, up. So it should sound like digga up, 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 digga up. Okay, and then you have the other version below it, which is what the student I usually give to the students. So you're developing the hands alone. So if you move on to the next part, we now have roll, build up, alternating. So again, based on all the other things we've done, we've been working on our alternating strokes. So now we're going to add just 1 buzz on the downbeats. So I'm going 1 E and 2 E and sorry, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and and it should literally sound like dugga da dup 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 dugga da dup dup dup. Even if you're doing 2, dugga dup dup dup. And what you're trying to look for here is that I'm getting 1 wrist turn for 2 notes. Not, don't worry right now about trying to get this like beefy, like, you're trying to get them to understand hand motions. And like I call it a 2 for 1. You're getting two bounces for 1 wrist stroke. So ultimately, when you build this up, and I have it broken down so you can add it on the E's and the U's and the ands, but ultimately you're getting to the point of where you can have a, let's say, 9-stroke roll, which would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, excuse me, 2, 4, 6, 8, release. So if I put that in time with a metronome, The biggest issue you're going to run into is students are going to want to like let the stick fall and stay down, and they have to prepare the stick for the next stroke type coming up. So they have to be ready to be up again. Okay, so you can do that in 2s and 3s, and eventually if they can do that, then it's just a matter of them moving their wrists faster. This is the only thing I'll add, and this is when you start getting into upper tempo ranges of like 90 beats per minute and more. Then you have to shift from a strictly wrist motion, which I'm doing, and eventually teach the students how to do an arm motion. So when you get to something like what most of the middle school bands are probably playing, something that's going around, let's say you have something that's around 110 and it has like a 9-stroke roll, I'm changing my motion. So this is a more mature thing because it's really hard to like turn my wrists that fast when I start getting into like the 120 and 132 tempos. So I have to go from a wrist to an arm motion. So something to consider, but for beginners, it's strictly a wrist motion still. Okay, I know I'm just kind of going on. Let's see. That is all of that. I'm looking through the rest of my snare drum stuff. Oh, okay. This is the one, I'll touch on one last thing and then I'll talk about some mallet stuff. So stroke types. The most important thing that percussionists learn outside of consistent hand motion is understanding how to apply stroke types to music. So stroke types for the percussionist is how you're preparing to play the next note. If I was a wind player and the very first note I was going to play was, let's just call it like first valve on the trumpet, I would push that valve down before I play anything. I wouldn't sit there and like have my fingers off and then I would all of a sudden like right before I play push the valve down. Percussion's the same way. It's just a matter of, is the stick up or is the stick down? And how you prepare the stick is the efficiency that they need, your students need to understand in order to be able to play different volumes quickly. So if you notice, this is where it's called 4 basic strokes single-handed. So this is to teach the students what they're doing just on one hand. Again, this is the same exercise I'm using at Eagle High School right now. It's perfectly fine for beginners. You just do it really slow. So, and again, it's 16th notes. I start at 30 beats per minute. So the letters above are full stroke is an F, downstroke is a D, tap stroke is a T, upstroke is a U. So just real quick to go over the 4 basic strokes. Full stroke starts in the up position, strikes the pad, rebounds to the same position. Next is the downstroke. So the stick is going to start in an up position. It is going to hit the pad and then rebound to a lower position. So in order to make the stick stop down, excuse me, it's not stopping. In order for the stick to rebound to a lower height, the trick is there's only 2 things that have to happen. My wrist has to stop down and my fingers have to stay in the same position. So this goes back to if you teach your students to take their fingers off the stick, they will not be able to play an appropriate downstroke. So if you're wondering why your students play forte and then they can't play piano real quick, it's because they can't freeze the wrist in a downward motion and they can't keep their fingers in this like closed position. You do not need to squeeze in order to make the stick stop down. Again, if I play this downstroke, am I here? I should immediately be able to pull the stick out of my hand. There's no pressure here. I shouldn't see you white knuckling it. And if anything, you can see the stick rebound. So I have students watch down here for their downstrokes, and I would isolate these individual strokes before I taught this exercise so that they stop down. The next thing is a tap stroke, starts at a low height and just rebounds to the same height, just a small wrist turn. And then the upstroke is starting at a low height, and then I'm rebounding and picking the stick up to a higher height. So we have full, down, tap, up, okay? The importance with this is there's only 2 volumes right now, forte, forte, piano, piano. If you want, you can tell students that the stick for the low height should be parallel to the pad. So it's not actually pointing down, it's parallel. And then everything else is just a full wrist turn. So you're trying to get them to rebound. This will take time to stop down. So when I teach the 4 basic strokes, I'll literally have them do just 1 stroke at a time, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. They should know that because they played it on hand a bazillion times. Downstrokes, we might literally go 1. And I give them a second to, if they stop up, I let them adjust the stick down until they get to the point of where it can stop where you want it to. Again, fingers are staying here, okay? And I'm not squeezing to get the stick to stop down. Most kids are gonna squeeze. So both of those full stroke and downstroke are both forte. Then my tap stroke and my upstroke are both piano. Most students will play their full stroke at the correct volume. The downstroke they'll play too soft because they're trying to slow the stick down, so you end up with this. So it looks correct, but sounds incorrect. I want this. The tap stroke and the upstroke should sound the same. Most students will overplay the upstroke because they will lift the stick before they play it. So they'll do this. So they end up with something that's a mezzo forte, and you want piano and piano. So the trick is trying to get those sound qualities to all be the same. So you have 4 stroke types with 2 volumes right now. So if we apply that to this exercise, I end up with something like this. So I'm just going to do the right hand, just the first measure. Pull, 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 down, tap, 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 up. I'll do the same thing with the left. And that's trying to get them to actually apply this to one hand. You would go through the whole thing. You can also do an inversion of this. So instead of starting up, you can start down. So they're starting with taps, lower height. That's the inversion. And then the last thing that I had on here was how to apply basic strokes in an alternating fashion. So if this is where band director, I've done this a couple times with some of my colleagues, and I've blown their mind about how much you have to think about playing some of this stuff. So let's say I'm doing what I just, so let's say I'm doing one of each stroke type. So full stroke, downstroke, downstroke, tap stroke, upstroke, upstroke. So that's going to be right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. So in order to know what the appropriate stroke type to use is, you have to have 2 notes, and you have to know their volume. So in this case, I've drawn the little slur markings to the note that you have to look to next in order to determine what the stroke type. So the first note I've labeled as a full stroke for you. It's because, oh, did I label it incorrectly? Well, the first ones are full stroke. I did something wrong. No, I did right because they're accents, sorry. So you have full stroke, and then the next note's accented. So because my right hand is going to go from an accented note to another accented note, I've now prepared the stick to play that. So it's a full stroke because I'm playing the first one and I'm preparing it for the second. Now, if I follow that second right hand going to the third right hand, it has to go from an accented note to an unaccented note. So that's why I have a downstroke. It goes from here, and now the next note I'm going to play is piano. So if I'm doing the right hand alone, I'm playing the exercise I just did, which was full stroke, downstroke, and then I'm ready to play my next note, which is going to be a tap stroke. Now I have to learn how to alternate that. So I would have full stroke, downstroke, downstroke. If I keep going, tap stroke, upstroke, upstroke. So that was 4 accented notes and 4 unaccented notes. So if I played that faster, that would be this. The reason why most students can't play that is because they approach every single note that they play as a downstroke. So they're never able to be more efficient because they're not preparing the stick to what comes next. So I gave a bunch of variations on how to do this as you go down the page. And you can kind of see what I did. I even did something where you could write in the stroke types for your students if you wanted to figure that out. So there's all of that. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's any other. That covers all the snare drum stuff. I know I'm like at my hour mark. As far as mallets go, I'm trying to think of anything I left off. We talked about teaching the chromatic scale. And I think the one thing that I covered a little bit, but I'll just go over real quickly, is we all know that the student should know the note names. And we know that there's a difficulty in like figuring that because it's an abstract concept. But once you get past that, most of the inefficiencies come, even on mallet, like inaccuracies of rhythm and note names are because of stroke types. So not only, like on pad, I was just worrying about up and down. Now on a mallet instrument, I have to worry about right and left and forwards and backwards. So that's a lot to think about from a spatial awareness standpoint. That is the main reason why mallet players are not successful. They're usually just trying to worry about what rhythm and notes on the page and then try to get it down here. That's why they just memorize it and put it here. So if you can teach your students to shift and look ahead note-wise, so you take the same concept that we just did from the 4 basic strokes, take that and layer note names on top of it. So if I had something where I wanted to go from, let's say I'm playing C on my keyboard, and the next note I was supposed to play was an E, so we're going to play an arpeggio. Like I have to, and it's all going to be forte. My stroke type is forte, so start in the up position, strike the instrument, come back up. But now I have to add a second layer, which is shifting to the right, which is the equivalent of setting up your either slide or your valves down. Like if you had time to play the first note, then put your valve down for the second note, you would absolutely demand that of your students. It's the same thing in percussion. You would play the first note, and then you immediately want to shift the mallet to the volume and note name that they're now going to play. So you have to take into account now you have 2 mallets to do that. So when we're doing this, let's just, for sake of ease, let's say I'm starting with my left hand and I wanted to play something like a C major arpeggio. C, E, G, C. So what I'm trying to do is, as soon as I play my C, I'm going to move my left hand as close to this G as possible because that's the next hand and my left hand's going to play. My right hand's going to play E. When my right hand plays E, it's going to shift over to C, and it'll allow my left hand to move over to get ready to play that G. That, just for a student to play that, there is more information than I think is usually thought about, and we're just worried about like read the note names, play the rhythms, hit the right note. Your students' success will go up exponentially if you make it a much more intellectual activity instead of why are you playing the wrong notes and why are you not playing the right dynamic. But you have to go slow enough because it's a lot to think about. That doesn't include going forward now. So one of the exercises that I teach, and I think I went over this last time, which is just teaching a chromatic scale and doing 4 on each note and having them saying the note names and using the appropriate stroke type. So we would go C, 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 shift. My right hand would shift over to D. C sharp, C sharp, C sharp, C sharp, shift. D, shift, D sharp, D sharp, D sharp, D sharp, shift. So my left hand has to go from the D sharp to get ready to play the F. E, shift, F, 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 F shift, F sharp, F sharp, F sharp, F sharp shift, G, 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 G shift, G sharp, G sharp, G sharp, G sharp shift, A, shift, G sharp, G sharp, G sharp, G sharp shift, E, C. And I would do this, I think I have it in my, the mallet portion of the handout that I had. Let me look at one more thing, and I'll try to wrap all this fun stuff up. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to type something in while I look for this real quick because I'm here to answer whatever questions you might have. Here we go. So in the clinic mallet portion of the Dropbox PDF that I talk about, I have speed note reading and just how to develop your mallet players. I guess the last thing I'll say is when you're developing your mallet players, they must have ingrained in them like rhythms, I would say at least one step beyond what you need them to play. If you want them to play half notes, they should be able to easily read quarter notes. I would say almost 2 levels. If you want them to play half notes, they should be able to read half notes, quarter notes, and probably 8 notes. If you want them to read quarter notes, they should be able to count eighth notes. I might have said that incorrectly. If you want them to play half notes, they should be able to count quarter notes and eighth notes. So they should always be a level or two ahead. For note names, I would use what I just had, or I would use the speed note reading that I have in here, and I would tell students that they have to pass a line off for me at 60 beats per minute, and they can't miss any of the note names saying them. So I know that when they look at a staff, they can read from the bottom ledger line to the top ledger line and spaces in between without making any mistakes before I would even let them like start playing the keyboard. Because you're also teaching them all the note names that you want on the instrument. And if they can do that, you're gonna have a lot less issue, because ultimately when you're teaching mallet players, you're teaching them peripheral vision. That's another reason why I do snare drum first, is because we have to develop all those skills, or at least most of those skills that I just went over, and then you have to add note names and peripheral vision on top of it. Percussion is one of like the only instruments in the band class where the student has to look at something, not physically touch anything, and then be able to put a target to it. And it usually moves too fast, and you have to train their eyes to be able to look up at the stand and down to the note, and then back up to the stand to be able to process all the information. And usually we just go too fast. And me as a percussionist, when I was teaching it, did it all the time. And I would frustrate myself because I just thought that they could be able to do it. And I didn't realize when I broke it down to the simplest form, like there was a lot of stuff that they had to think about. So, yeah. So if anybody has any other questions, if there's any questions of anything I went over, or maybe of the previous one, I can give a couple minutes to like go over that, because I'm an open book. But I tried to go over as much as I could that I thought was really important for this year. If you could only teach your kids that stuff, you're going to have a phenomenal percussion section if they were able to do that. So any questions?
Rob, I know there's only a couple people here, but would you mind talking about the details of your demonstration at Eagle, just in case people see that by tomorrow?
Yeah, so tomorrow, or excuse me, Wednesday, I think we're doing 4 o'clock. I think we're gonna do an hour and a half. So at Eagle High School from 4 to 5:30, I'm gonna be doing basically all of this stuff, but in person. So if you wanna show up, we've got pads at the high school. If you have a pair of sticks or pair of mallets, I will literally go through all this stuff and try to show you how to do it so you can demonstrate it for your students. So we're going to do that on Wednesday. Yeah, from 4 to 5:30, and it's open. So if you have other director friends that like think they might benefit, like the more the merrier. Like we're going to try to socially distance and have masks on and all that kind of fun stuff. But I just want to spread the wealth as much as I can, and it can be anybody. It can be high school too. Yeah, like anybody. Please show up, because yeah, I just want to share the wealth. So anybody who wants to come check that out, that would be great. And bring questions. I think like that for me, I can talk about this for days, but if there's something specifically like you have a student that's just like you don't know how to fix that, I'll show you how to troubleshoot a lot of it. And I've been doing a lot of with Eagle High School, like all the stuff I'm talking about with this stuff. We've been kind of breaking new ground with those students there in the drumline and the front ensemble. Other questions?
Okay, it looks like we're good.
Okay.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd add is like if anybody ever has any other marching band related questions and stuff too, like I'm helping TJ Erickson out at Eagle, and if you have other things that are unpercussion related, just I can really offer whatever I can with rehearsal techniques for marching band and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to just be percussion. So I'll help in whatever way I possibly can.
Okay, well, we really appreciate your time again, Rob, and I will make sure that I get this up on the YouTube channel with that information, so that if people view tomorrow, they can at least see that you're going to be doing this. And I can put a comment also on the SDE webpage and the IMEA webpage.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll be doing it in the band room, just to be clear. So, and if you're not sure, reach out to TJ. He's the one that put it out in the first place to us together. So, yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.